Time that we were together, we were talking about Joseph Smith in different jails. So you recall that he goes to Independence. Can you remember the name of the general that had planned to run for governor? And he concludes, I'm going to show Joseph Smith off to the people in my town of Independence.
Lucas.
Okay, Samuel Lucas, good. And recall that General Clark, whose men have now just destroyed which town? Far West. Far West is now completely destroyed. General Clark now sends a message to Lucas. Sir, you made a mistake. You've taken our prisoners. And with that, you now get this Lucas saying, views Clark now as a possible political enemy, someone he would run against. He now indicates that I will bring Joseph to your hometown. In other words, let me ruin your political career as mine has now been ruined. So today we pick up Joseph Smith now is in Richmond jail. Recall there's a total of 9 LDS prisoners, and while in jail he will be in Richmond for about 3 weeks. And during that jail experience, you'd say, what's it like for Joseph? He has shackles, meaning irons have been put on his wrists, on his ankles, and the same with every LDS prisoner. They have a chain that now chains this guy to this guy to this guy, and all 9 men are chained against the same wall. If you were to say, how was it difficult for them? They have no, you'd say, bathroom privileges. They called it back then outhouse privileges. In other words, no man is allowed to leave the jail for any reason. That's a personal reason. We talked about last time that food that they are fed with, they receive no utensils, no forks, no spoons. They're eating it like you might say a household pet. And worse than that, you get the guards will guard them from the other side of the room. And they have their guns facing them. And we find that one night while they're there in jail, the guards who are Clark's men start talking about the horrible things that they have done to men, women, and children in Far West. And it's like one man says, hey, I've done this. And the other man goes, I can top that. I've done this. And the next one, I've done this. And this is the time when Parley P. Pratt, he's listening, he's awakened. It's about midnight. And he can hear the horrible things they're talking about, how they, defiled women, all the things that they had done. And Parley P. Pratt wonders, should I stand up and do anything? And while he's debating, Parley then describes that Joseph now stands up. He's chained, and obviously the rattle of the chain is going to wake all the other group up. And he said, Joseph now spoke like a lion. It's like he's roaring. And as Joseph now speaks, he says, silence, you fiends of the infernal pit. Okay, what does that mean? Infernal pit. Okay, you fiends of hell. Okay, you enemies, you horrible people. From hell, he says, silence, you fiends of the infernal pit, or he says, or you or I will die this instant. In other words, wow, you choose. Either you're going to die or we're going to die together, but I'm not going to listen anymore to this. The result is the guards begin to shake. And you know how you read in the Book of Mormon that Nephi wants his brothers to build his ship. And the brothers refuse, and Nephi commands it. Remember, they begin to shake. And you get the same kind of thing with these guards. They're shaking, they get down on the ground, they're asking Joseph's forgiveness. And it's always called the night the guards quaked, meaning, a shaking. The night the guards now shake. The next morning, who's our man that shows up? He was a member of the Quorum of the 12 and says, hey, I'd like to beat up one of these prisoners here in Richmond. Okay, William McClellan. And remember, he shows up and he says, hey, I want to beat up somebody. And the jailer says, oh, great fun. And then he says, but I want to beat up that man, Joseph Smith. And the jailer goes, oh, you can't imagine our night. In other words, choose any other man. And Joseph, who loves to fight, saying, hey, that's good with me. And remember, McClellan wants Joseph chained up and to fight while he's still chained. And Joseph still thinks it's good, but then the jailer says no. So McClellan comes back, and this time he has a what? Club. With the idea, keep him, you can take the chains off. We're going to fight, but don't let him take the club away from me. Well, okay, the refusal is he can't do that. Where does McClellan go when he can't beat up Joseph? He goes to where Emma still is in Far West and steals all their goods. Well, okay. Meantime, back to Richmond. In Richmond, the reason they're there for 3 weeks is that there will be something called a Richmond hearing. Notice it's not a trial, but it's a hearing. And the difference between a trial and a hearing, trial in this case, the judge can hit the gavel and say, you're going to jail or you're a free man. A hearing that's going on in Richmond, a hearing is to see if there is enough evidence against these men to hold them over for trial. And so, okay, Joseph's going to need an attorney. Who do you suppose he chooses? Donovan. Okay, Donovan, this great attorney, about 6'4", and he's won all these cases before the Supreme Court of Missouri. Joseph will choose Donovan and his partner. Meantime, in a hearing, the opposite side, called the prosecution, will go forward first. And which means that those attorneys need to call witnesses who will say all these horrible things against the prisoners. So the prisoners are now taken to a courtroom, which was basically a log cabin. And you'd say the judge, crazy thing, the judge will eventually want to be governor of Missouri. Everybody wants to be governor. Why? But okay. And he will eventually be that governor. But here's this judge. He now calls forward, the prosecuting attorneys to bring forward their witnesses. Okay. One of the first witnesses called upon will be a man named David Whitmer. What's wrong with that?
He was a state president.
Okay, he was a state president. He was one of the 3 witnesses. And suddenly, David Whitmer now testifies against who? Joseph and fellow prisoners who are not allowed to sit down during any time of the hearing. So they come in, with their, and they've got their chains, but they're all standing up. David Whitmer is called to testify. W.W. Phelps is called to testify. Orson Hyde is called to testify. Thomas B. Marsh is called to testify. Okay, what do you think of that?
I don't like it.
Okay, you don't like it. You'd say, here we're all people where you'd say leaders of the church, apostles, a witness, and suddenly they're all turning their heel against Joseph. Now, if you were to say the man that gave the most damaging testimony was a man named Samson Avard. What do we know about Samson Avard?
Danite.
Okay, he's the head of the Danites. Remember this secret organization? Suddenly, Samson Avard, it takes literally 5 single typed pages to get, all of his testimony. But he now says Joseph is the originator. He organized the Danites. True or false? False. And what he has done, he has testified, these horrible things. As Joseph now listens to their testimonies, he writes a letter to Emma. And he said, Emma, it was like attending some kind of court in hell. He said, to see my friends then lying in their testimonies against him. Finally, the prosecution, meaning all of those against, now rest their case, and it's time for the defense attorney to take over the next day. And who's that defense attorney again? Donovan, Alexander Donovan. Donovan now turns to Joseph and fellow prisoners, and he goes, I'm going to need people to testify in your behalf, because by this point, there are 27 charges now against Joseph that have come forward by his former friends, former leaders of the church, and charges range from He stole an alarm clock. Okay, remember how Richmond's saying the alarm clock was stolen? He's stolen the alarm clock. He's broken into a chicken coop. He's knocked down some fences, all the way to he rapes women. He has murdered, and he has committed treason against the United States, which is actually the worst crime in our nation. So 27 charges that go from something so simple as an alarm clock is missing to treason against the United States. For Sidney Rigdon, one of the other prisoners, he has 25 charges, and then the rest going down less charges. You realize Joseph and fellow prisoners, are they in trouble? Mm-hmm. Okay, they're in big trouble. So Donovan now wants to know, do you know anybody that can testify in your behalf that you've never raped women, that you've never stolen alarm clocks, that you are patriotic to the United States? Suddenly, Joseph's fellow prisoners get together and they write down names of people they know that live in Far West that's 11 miles away. So suddenly, those names are now passed to Clark's kind of captain. And so the captain now goes back over to Far West. The town's pretty much destroyed, but the people have been gathering, trying to get whatever they can to try and get out. And suddenly he goes to the main town square. What's the main town square of Far West? Temple Square, okay? And he announces Joseph needs help. He needs people who will come forward and testify on his behalf. Suddenly, people who had been hiding when they saw the military back in, they're coming forward and they're saying, oh, my name's not on the list, but please take me. And take my brother and take my cousin. And then here comes somebody, oh, great, my name's on the list, but you know, my best friend's hiding back here. Let me get him. He'll come too. Finally, within a matter of minutes, 80 men now step forward and say, take us. Those 80 men are marched back to Richmond. None of the 80 are allowed to testify, and instead, all 80 men are put in jail. And you'd say, what's jail? It just means they've emptied out another log cabin of, some farming, things like shovels, and suddenly those 80 men are now in jail. Well, does Donovan have a chance when he has no witnesses? Okay, no. And so Donovan, he goes, my hands are tied. He goes, Joseph, give me other names. And Joseph goes, no. He goes, I won't put any more of my friends in jeopardy. Well, at this, Donovan now stands up, and, he's trying to figure out, how do you say they're not guilty of these? There's no more, that evidence is, it's bogus. It's the people lied. And for Donovan, 5 people will come into the courtroom who are Latter-day Saints. And they will say, we will testify. Now, I noticed they weren't part of the 80, but 5 kind of break into the courtroom, say we will testify. Now, I'm only going to do one example so you get an idea of their testimonies. One of those, and you'd say, oh, wow, they came in, it could have been wonderful. But one that came in was Sidney Rigdon's daughter. And this daughter, as she swears she'll tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, she said, I can't speak for any other prisoners than my father. And you're like, lady, come on, you got 8 others, step to the plate. And she says, here's her dad, 25 charges against him, treason, murder, rape, horrible crimes. And she says, well, I don't know about all the other crimes, but I know my father would never steal an alarm clock. And you're like, oh, lady, could she ever attend BYU Hawaii? What would you say? No, the ultimate of okay, she wins. She's, you're like, oh, wow. And other testimonies were similar. For Donovan, at one point, so you could see how prejudiced the judge had already made up his mind. At one point, Donovan is addressing the issue of treason against the United States. The reason that Joseph and Hiram had been charged with treason was because both men had been heard to say that Nebuchadnezzar's dream, remember the stone cut out without hands that will fill the whole earth, Joseph had been heard to say, that's not the United States, that's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And suddenly that's treasonous, because at the United States at the time, we were saying manifest destiny. There's no end to the United States. We will be the Atlantic to the Pacific. And suddenly, and the United States was calling itself the stone that's cut out of the mountain without hands. And Joseph's been heard to say, and Hiram, no, that's our church. Well, the result will be is Donovan then said to the judge, is that really treason against the United States? I mean, it's not terror attack, it's not espionage, it's not taking over a city, is that really treasonous? And the judge says yes. At which point Donovan said, if you're going to call that treasonous, Judge, you might as well pronounce the entire Holy Bible treasonous. And suddenly the judge hits his gavel and he pronounces the entire Holy Bible is treasonous. Okay, is the guy an idiot? Okay, absolutely. Okay, finally, Donovan says, if a cohort of angels, which means a legion in Roman legion time was 6,000 men, so a cohort would be 3,000 angels. If 3,000 angels were to come in this courtroom and to tell this judge that these men, there's not enough evidence to hold them for trial, he wouldn't believe it. Okay, with that, the prisoners, it's now time for a ruling. Is there enough evidence to hold him over for a trial? What do you think the judge says? Yes. Okay, but his conclusion is, some of the prisoners are dangerous, and some of the prisoners are very dangerous. So, dangerous ones, he concludes, Parley P. Pratt is dangerous. And you're like, Parley? Are you kidding? Okay. He concludes Parley is dangerous. But then he says they're very, very dangerous. And the very dangerous, he said, Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, Hiram Smith, and a few others. And he said, as a result, the dangerous prisoners, like Parley, you will stay here in Richmond. In other words, we can hold you here with our log cabin. But the very dangerous, you're going to go to what you would say is a really big, or not big, but for its time perhaps, lockdown facility. It is the jail. Okay, so the difference, you'd say, if you've ever had friends picked up by police, you'd say they're like in a police headquarters. They're not in the big jail of the state. So in Utah, for example, you could be in the police quarters, but if you're going to be in the big penitentiary or the big jail, you're at a place called Point of the Mountain. And you've got barbed wire, you've got security, you're wearing the look of somebody who's in jail. Well, okay. So the big lockdown place in Missouri, anybody name it? Mm-hmm. Liberty Jail. So we say goodbye to Parley and others in Richmond, and we turn to Liberty Jail. What makes Liberty Jail different than Richmond is how the jail is constructed. So the jail itself is 2 stories, and you'd say on the outside you've got stone. Okay, so all the outside is stone coming down, and you'd say on the inside you have like little boards. Like 2x4s, boards are going down. But between the stones and the little boards, you have loose rock. And you have loose rock here, you have loose rock up here, loose rock all the way down the side. And why that then is a jail? Let's say you're in jail, you want to escape, and so you start kind of with a spoon or something, you start, digging at the wood. And pretty soon you got a little hole. But the problem is, once you get a hole, what's going to happen? Here's all the rocks coming down, and then the jailer comes in with the food. Suddenly he sees the rocks and he goes, don't think it. In other words, you are in, for that time, what was considered a very secure structure. Okay, as Joseph and fellow prisoners come to the structure, They no longer need the chain or kind of like the cuffs. How come?
Too secure.
Okay, too secure. The building itself will keep them inside. And you'd say the only way through is a door, but the jailer comes in. The jailer has guns, and he's coming in, and he can have, his men behind him. So for Joseph Smith, you'd say Joseph, by the 1st of December until the month of April, will be in the jail facility of Liberty. How long is he in jail? Like 5 months, right? And if you were to say, what is the jail like? And you'd say, oh, wow, horrible. In the jail, they weren't allowed any kind of bathroom privileges. No outhouse for 5 months. They had straw on the floor, but they never changed the straw during the whole time they were there. Just that alone, you'd say sanitation. We walk out of here and, we want to make sure our hands are clean and, just sanitation for 5 months, you would say horrible. In addition, when food was brought to the prisoners, they brought it in a basket that the hen had just laid her eggs in. And you'd go, oh, wow, day after day after day. Okay, adding to the issues, at one point in this town of Liberty, there was a black man that was hung until dead for some crime. And after he was hung, they cut off his leg, they fried it, you're making, some kind of dinner. They fried it, and they served it to the prisoners, calling it Mormon beef. Now, okay, so you'd say, what is the jail like? You'd say, well, the jail, horrible conditions. However, the jailer will allow then Latter-day Saints to come and to visit. So the jailer allows visitors. He even allows them on occasion to spend the night. If you were to say, who visits Joseph? And you'd say, Emma comes. And Hiram, Mary Fielding Smith, I hope you heard that yesterday, Mary Fielding Smith comes. And you'd say, Sidney Rigdon's daughter, that's kind of she comes. Okay. And you'd say, many people will come to visit. Joseph, who's very social, you know how you can be at home and, well, I can talk to my husband, and then finally we're going, let's go outdoors and see if somebody's over at the kind of playground, because you want to talk to other people. And so, goodbye. Okay, so you'd say they have lots of visitors, and the visitors, Joseph is thrilled. But of all the visitors that come, no one has a bigger impact than Brigham Young. So you remember, members of the 12, some of them have now testified against Joseph, and Joseph's been wondering about Brigham, and where is Brigham? Where is he? Okay, how come he's late?
Gathering the saints and helping them to move.
Okay, good. He's working with the saints, but remember, what was he called to do? What did he help build? Okay, the Kirtland Temple. So you'd say saints are moving on to Missouri. The Lord's accepted the temple as beautiful and his place of abode, but you'd say, Brigham, what are you doing? Well, remember, he's a builder. So he's trying to get the windows perfect. Oh, I don't like that window. Okay. And remember, the temple taken over by apostates, but Brigham's still building. And remember, he stands up and he goes, I'm different than you. I know Joseph's still a prophet, and he's chased out. Well, he comes to Missouri, and the big question is, where's his current president? Where's Thomas B. Marsh? He wants to report in. Where's Marsh?
Richmond.
Okay, he's in Richmond. He's testified against Joseph. So the next question is, well, remember the seniority by age. He wants to know, where's David W. Patton? Where's that man?
Dead.
Okay, he's dead. Battle of Crooked River. He'd been wounded and now dead. And suddenly, you'd say, Brigham Young, how old are you? And the answer is, he's 37 years old. And he's now president of the Quorum of the 12. And as president, he wants to know, well, then where is Joseph? What's the answer?
Jail.
Okay, Joseph's in jail. Joseph's in Liberty. So Brigham Young now comes and For Joseph, when he sees Brigham, you know, sometimes you'd say you carry your recommend in your eyes. You ever notice you go to church, you're not living great, you sneak in the back door and you sneak out early? Okay. But all of a sudden, when Joseph Smith sees Brigham at the jail, he puts his arms around him, he begins to sob, and Brigham now wants to know, what do you want me to do? In other words, the president of the 12 gets his marching orders then from the prophet. And the answer is, take the saints to safety. In other words, we've got an extermination order on. Take them to safety. And Joseph's hope is Brigham will take them somewhere between the far west temple site and the Kirtland Temple. In other words, stay in the United States, but take them somewhere for safety.